Hello and welcome to our midweek meditations. I'm Victor Kim. I'm the lead minister at Richmond Presbyterian Church. And our conversations, these midweek meditations have become conversations with members of our congregation and some of the staff here at RPC. Given our context of the pandemic, it's a great way to get to know one another, especially with some of the people that we haven't had a chance to meet in person. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jacqueline Cleland. And Jacqueline is one of our program planners. So we have hired a couple of program planners. They're part-time. We normally would have called them in the past summer students, but they're more than just summer students. And they're program planners that are working with our children and youth ministries. And Jacqueline is one of our program planners. And she's also currently a student studying for ministry at Vancouver School of Theology. And so I welcome Jacqueline to our conversation. Hello, Jacqueline.
Hello, Victor. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you with us. So these are these conversations that are going to try to help our congregation to get to know one another a little bit better. Most of us have never met you in person. I have. I'm delighted to have met you in person, but most in our congregation will have only seen you on the screen, sort of making an announcement here and there, coming on to talk about work with children and youth. So let's take this time to tell them a little bit more about yourself. So why don't we begin by asking you, where are you from? What was your background like? What did you grow up wanting to be? And sort of just to the point of where you experienced the call to ministry. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Gladly. So I'm very happy to brag. I grew up in the Maritimes back in New Brunswick, and it has a very different culture than out here. I grew up about a block and a half away from my grandmother, and we'd go to coffee with our family downtown because everyone could meet and join. I grew up with a swimming pool not too far away and swimming every summer, sometimes during the winter with indoor pools. It was a lovely, great community to grow up in. Everyone knows each other's secrets. And I think the running gag for me has been coming out here is the first time I've had to introduce myself. I've always been Bob Howie's granddaughter. And I have to say, hi, I'm Jacqueline. You don't know me. A little bit different. I grew up with my mom already having been very excited to figure out where I went to university. She wanted me to go to the University of New Brunswick. So the first bank account I ever had, she went to the bank on campus to check which bank they had to open it for me. And I loved it. It was a bit of a running gag because in first grade, I decided I was going to go to the University of New Brunswick and get my bachelor in science. And that's what I did quite a few years later. I am very goal-oriented, and having a plan set out was so much fun. So I did my bachelor's in medicinal chemistry with honors. And then I had an opportunity to work in an analytical lab. So I was recruited to do my master's of analytical chemistry. And it was so much fun with a look at electroanalytical chemistry. And then this is the part of the story where people go, what happened? Because I went from electroanalytical chemistry to ministry. And there's a little bridge that people go, what? But I'd always been involved in the church, and I knew no matter what was happening, I would always be involved in the church. And it kind of took a moment to recognize that, hey, if this is what I'm certain on, as much as I love chemistry, why aren't I in ministry?
So there you are growing up in New Brunswick in a very tightly knit community with sort of the plans to stay local, study chemistry. And here you are now, right across the country in Vancouver, in a setting where you find yourself largely anonymous, not knowing anybody, studying for ministry. So what happened?
This is where I blame God completely and utterly, which is always the right thing to say on recorded. But what happens is I was doing my master's in chemistry, and I love chemistry. God blessed me with curiosity, and I can dig into little aspects forever because it's fascinating. But I was going through a bit of a transition phase of the church. We were looking for a new minister. I was on the search committee. I was on Christian education committee. I'd been a Sunday school teacher for over a decade. I was on session. And at one point, I started lay preaching. And I remember vividly the interim moderator saying, hey, you'd be good at ministry. Have you thought about it? And I kind of laughed. It was one of those things of like, oh, that's sweet, but she doesn't really mean that. And then I went to coffee with the head of the ladies group and I told her this story. It's kind of like a ha ha, wasn't she nice? And we were at, well, we said we go to coffee. We don't drink coffee. So I had hot chocolate, she had tea. And she just looked me dead in the eye and said, Jacqueline, no, we've been waiting for you to make this realization for years. You're being slow. I was like, oh, okay, well, thanks. And I just casually sipped my drink. And then I went out to dinner with a friend at Brewbaker's. And I can remember vividly, I had this beautiful mushroom risotto and it was delicious. And it had like goat's cheese. And I was telling this story to my friend who'd been an atheist and throughout our conversations had become agnostic. And she said, oh, yeah, I figured you would be a minister, but you never did it. So I thought you just said no because of the money. And I was sitting there and I was just at that point, we were at the creme brulee and I was sitting there going, 1, 2, 3, all not connected. This reminds me a bit of the call of Samuel biblically. I wonder if I should listen. And I ended up trusting God. I figured if God is hitting me over the head this blatantly, there's a reason for it.
I don't recall reading about Samuel's connection with the mushroom risotto or the creme brulee. I thought maybe you were going to say that as you were eating the risotto that you saw something in the plate that said, Jacqueline. It's a great story that others, of course, it's always our call is confirmed not only in ourselves, but of course in the people around us, right? And sometimes it's the people around us that help to vocalize and to clarify that which we're struggling with within ourselves. And sounds like you were always thinking about this, always wanting to be part of the church, but it took a couple of people to kind of say, what are you waiting for? Yeah? I mean, to have the head of the women's group and then to have an agnostic friend of yours, you couldn't ask for more varied people to confirm that sense of call. So that's what brought you out to VST?
Well, part of it was, and the other part, this is where I blame Ross Lockhart, because I love being in everything. And I had been an elder at my church, and I had the opportunity to be a young adult representative at the General Assembly 2 or 3 or maybe 4 years past. I have no concept of time anymore. And I remember Ross came to talk to us, and there were other people who were thinking about ministry. I had no thought about that. I was just like, he's really interesting. It's nice to talk to him to learn more. And I got an email from Ross, and I hadn't given him my email. He'd given me his card. I put it in my suitcase. I lost it. Sorry, Ross. And I got an email from him just talking to me and being really nice. And then he was on a pilgrimage in Spain. He's like, I would love to talk to you about your faith, your call, and like going to school at Vancouver School of Theology. And I was like, I am not being responsible for that phone bill. No. He's like, well, I've been talking to the dean about you. You could talk to her if you'd like. I was like, sure, just like as long as you're not calling me long distance on a cell phone, just no. And I talked to Pat, who's the dean at the time, and they started me as a permission to register student. I was still taking some classes. I decided to take a year to work because I had heard the horror stories about how expensive Vancouver was. They weren't exaggerated. And it was just fabulous to start to meet people online. And I have to admit, I'm very happy I did that online first because it made the transition in the pandemic easier to going fully online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're living through a really strange time as a student, of course, with the pandemic, and you're also living through a very strange time in terms of any sort of work that you're doing. Part of the work that you're doing is you're with us here at RPC as a part-time program planner. You've been working with Anne Marie and also with James Lalong. But the work, of course, has been largely online as well. I mean, typically these positions, you'd show up here on a Sunday, you'd show up here maybe on another day of the week, you'd spend a few hours with our kids. you'd go out to places, you'd do social outings or sort of faith-based outings, youth group, children's groups, all of these things, and hardly any of that is happening. Rather, you're doing most of it online, and it's harder to, I think, get kids to be involved in some of these online activities because they're so inundated with other things that they have to be doing online these days with school and other projects. So it's been a challenging time, no doubt. But as you say, having done some distance education, I think probably has helped you. But what would you say would be, what's been the toughest part of either, being a VST student right now, or working here as a part-time program planner? What's been the toughest part of it, and what's been the most rewarding part of it for you?
For me, the most difficult part has honestly been the Zoom fatigue and the engagement. Those seem to go hand in hand constantly. There's a lot of expectations. We're on Zoom, it's wearying, it drains your eyes, it gives some people migraines, and it's really hard. And just adapting to that and doing it creatively and not going always to the default show a video or just constantly lecture at someone, that's kind of been the biggest struggle because you need to invoke more engagement. So some of the things, at least with the youth, I say with the youth, I did it in a grad class last semester too. We do physical actions, we do call and response, we do stuff where they know that their input makes a difference. So that way they're engaged, they're listening. I always prefer people to be on screen, but if they can't, that's okay as long as we know why. And stuff like, for some people, vocalizing's hard. So the chat box, we have it going. And we do options if people don't want to say anything or type anything. It's put your thumb on your nose or your finger on your nose if you agree with option 1, or give like bunny ears for option 2. It feels a little ridiculous, but it's fun, it makes you laugh, and you keep going. And I think one of the most rewarding parts is, okay, I hope someone laughs at this, but is the kids have figured out I'm addicted to potatoes, and like they will have potato backgrounds in their screen, and they will make little jokes, and just the building of community where you choose to share who you are and be vulnerable and just open up, because it's hard on Zoom and it takes a lot of trust. And that we've gotten to the point where I'm hearing about Among Us and Minecraft, and I'm hearing details about math tests that I feel really sorry for them for, because doing that stuff like that online is hard. I think that is the best part of it, the building the community despite being online, because of the intentionality behind connecting. You have to open up and share yourself, but it's those little things that really make it worth it.
Thanks for those thoughts and for that encouragement. Jacqueline, you've obviously had you've gone through a period of discernment around this call to ministry. You grew up in the faith. You've always felt that you wanted to be part of the faith community. Speaking of the faith community, do you have any heroes in the faith? Are there people that have inspired you either more broadly or more intimately, on more of a local basis? But are there heroes in the faith for you that have been an inspiration as you've journeyed through your life?
There are, yes, but one thing I've always noticed is I like, and this is going to be side tangential, I really like the stars you see every night as opposed to the shooting stars, because you can count on them, rely on them, and they bring constant joy, but we sometimes overlook them.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of my heroes in faith have been the people in choir who've shown up every week, who've been there, sung, and they've done their best. It's been my Sunday school teachers, and it's been the lay preachers who come again and again to be here with us. It's a lot of people who have their struggles, but they still come to God. And to me, those are some of the most inspiring people, everyday people doing their best. And if I had to go biblical for a second, I think my favorite inspiration is Miriam. I love that she plays the the timpani or the temperaza, because I played percussion as well. And there's part of her story of figuring out the odds and how to still follow God. I just love it.
Interesting. Yeah, you're right in the sense that I think in a couple of weeks, actually, we'll be preaching about transfiguration. And I think in the same way, we can't live only on the mountaintop. And just as you're saying, we can't be only looking at shooting stars. We need to go with Jesus into the valleys, kind of where the work gets done. And that's the ordinary people whose faith inspires us, because they're there all the time, right? They're constantly there. They're not like that fleeting moment on the mountaintop. You can't capture that and hold on to it. You can't make that last. But the work of ministry is always there. And I think that's where most of us come in, right? And it's not always glamorous. Oftentimes it's not glamorous. Most of the time it's not. But I think when we do it, when we're engaged in it, there is a joy and a sense of purpose and a sense of a reward that comes with it. So when you graduate, I don't know how long before you graduate, but when you graduate, what's the vision? What's the plan?
I think there's going to be a celebratory glass of cranberry juice when I celebrate. I don't know. There's a running gag that if I don't return to the Maritimes, people are going to be upset. And I love my people back home and I miss them. But I'm waiting to hear where God's calling, because over the past few years, I've heard God's call towards food and faith and fellowship, which is different than the die in the pulpit idea I grew up with. And I just can't wait to see where God calls me. I would love to be part of a community. I love community. And I think maybe a church where we can be the everyday people together, working together, maybe not the shooting star, but those beautiful little stars that are there every night. I think that would be amazing, and to just see where God is calling us all and working together.
Jacqueline, it's been a real treat to be in conversation with you. We're delighted to have you with us here at RPC as one of our program planners, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and learn from you, and also in wanting to support you as you finish your studies at VST and discern where God is calling you. Yeah, I mean, the Maritimes, I've never been there. I've never lived there. I've been there. Enjoyed my time in both PEI and in Halifax. But it's never been a place that is called to me, in the sense that people that are from the Maritimes really, really find that call home. So wherever God takes you, I'm really confident that God will use you for God's purpose. So thanks very much for our conversation. Let me just say a quick prayer for you. Gracious God, I want to thank you for Jacqueline and for her conversation with us today. Bless her in her continued studies at VST, in her continued discernment around ministry and what your plans for her are, and how her gifts are continuing to be grown, developed, and matured through your guidance. Bless her time with us here at RPC as well, and just watch over her, and watch over especially our children and youth within our community, that they may grow and increase in their faith, understanding, and in their capacity to be the people of God. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, Jacqueline, thanks very much. Have a great week.
Thanks. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.